Mind chatter always shows up when it feels like there's a lot at stake and there's a whole lot of uncertainty. This is how our minds work. Our minds are apt to try to protect us from potential hazards or dangers. Off the field, if you were walking close to a flame, there's a part of your mind that warns you, don't get too close, you could burn yourself. I say to athletes, that's exactly the same thing going on when you're getting onto the lacrosse field or onto the baseball diamond. Your mind is warning you. You're not worried there about getting burned, but you're worried there about maybe getting psychologically burned.
In this episode, we're talking about how parents and caring adults can support their teen athletes through all of the ups and downs of sports.
I have a huge whiteboard in my office where we write down all the things that are potentially at stake in this upcoming tournament. And inevitably listed as, disappointing parents or not giving them the return on the investment I hoped. And when kids sort of get it off their chest and we don't necessarily have to fix it, but it just has to be, it has to be expressed so it's not some dirty little secret.
Welcome to the SpeakUp podcast, where we share what we have heard and learned over the past 2 decades working with over 30,000 youth and families. Together, we are building a community of support around young people. We're here to foster communication and help parents relate in ways that make teens feel heard and seen so they can thrive. So let's embark on this journey together as we uncover the keys to empowering the next generation. Welcome to the SpeakUp podcast. I'm Martie Bernicker, the Executive Director of SpeakUp. This episode is brought to you by our friends at the Uncommon Individual Foundation, UIF, a catalyst for change through mentoring. UIF's OnTrack Plus software is transforming the educational landscape for underserved students by creating pathways to college credits and scholarships. Discover more at uif.org. In every SpeakUp encounter with teenagers, there's always a voice that captures the thoughts and feelings of countless others. Their words stay with you long after. Let's listen to one of those voices now in our Teens Tell Us moment.
It helps when you remind me that blowing the tryouts doesn't mean I'm not a great athlete, or getting a C in chemistry doesn't mean I can't be a doctor.
We are here today with Dr. Mitch Greene, a licensed clinical and sports psychologist who works with young people, especially athletes. Dr. Greene has a specialized practice that focuses on helping people who are struggling with their mental health or performance on the field and living a satisfying life off the field. His clients seek his help to overcome mental hurdles such as confidence lapses, injury setbacks, anxiety and depression, as well as performance anxiety. He is the author of Courage Over Confidence. His new book provides a stepwise approach to managing the negative self-talk that many young people struggle with today. Dr. Greene also offers workshops on peak performance strategies and mental health awareness, providing practical tools to enhance communication and goal setting. Dr. Greene holds a PhD in clinical psychology from Temple University and is an active endurance athlete and a dad. Mitch, we are thrilled to have you on the SpeakUp podcast. You are a person who has been a gift to SpeakUp over, I think it's probably close to 15 years now. I know you've been on speed dial and you've done a lot of our parent coffees. You've been an opening speaker, and we are so grateful for all that we've learned from you in the past, and we're excited to bring you to our audience today.
Thank you, Martie. I love that we get a chance to collaborate again today.
Thanks. All right. So, Mitch, one of the things that comes to mind is talk a little bit about some of the common dynamics, challenging dynamics that you see in your practice with young people, young athletes, and their families.
I think the best thing or the best place to start is that youth sports now is a mega $1 million business. And parents often unwittingly get indoctrinated into the world of youth sports and the big business part of it when our kids are very young. And when the kids get started in sports, it gets to be a lot of pressure really quickly because kids start to identify themselves as not just a student or a friend. They start to identify themselves as athletes. Games are now live streamed, sometimes starting in middle school, but now basically all high school games are live streamed and broadcast potentially around the world. The money being spent traveling from city to city and state to state, sometimes internationally, contributes to this feeling that you're not just out there just playing a game, but you're out there as sort of part of this big business machine. And for a lot of kids, this adds undue pressure onto them and undue pressure onto the parents. The parents are investing tons of money and time and energy into their athletic sons and daughters. The kids feel that pressure. They want to live up to the expectations that parents or others have of them. And so my practice is a place where kids can come and talk about things like how hard it can be to be a young athlete these days. Because a lot of times there's not a real great place to talk about it. Sometimes you don't want to tell your coach what's bothering you because you don't know how he or she will react. Sometimes we don't want to tell our parents because we think they might just tell us, what they think we want to hear. So a clinical and sports psychologist like myself provides a space, provides an opportunity for kids to talk about the pressures they're feeling, what their worries are, what their relationship challenges are. And I guess that's what I'm seeing is in need more and more for these young people at the junior level, at the college level, and at the elite and pro level. We're seeing more and more people like myself being available to kids and young people because the pressures now feel like they're bigger than ever.
One of the things I've noticed is that a lot of the elite and professional athletes have been much more vocal about their own mental health challenges. And have you seen that to be a helpful thing for your younger athletes?
Incredibly helpful. And I am someone who pays very close attention as best as I can to what these pros and elite athletes are saying, because I want to pass that down to these younger generation and have them see if Michael Phelps is talking about the fact that he gets depressed, or if DeMar DeRozan, a very famous NBA basketball player, talks about, throwing up before a game. If you're struggling, it might be more normal than you might think. So those athletes, what they're doing at the top level is incredibly helpful for me in the work that I do. And it's just normalizing across the board that there's no perfect athlete. Even the best get in their heads sometimes. And that's partly why I wrote the book. I wanted to be able to sort of spread the message that it's okay to have worries. It's normal to have doubts. And yes, the landscape is really changing and it's moving in the right direction.
So, Mitch, one of the things you said that stuck with me is that the biggest psychological challenge athletes face isn't the game itself, but something that you call mind chatter, that internal conversation riddled with self-doubt and second-guessing and negativity. Can you talk a little bit more about mind chatter and how athletes can manage it?
Yeah, I would say the number one reason people come knocking on my door is because they lack confidence. They used to be confident. They've lost it. They don't know how to find it again. They don't know if they're ever going to find it again. And that usually leads into this conversation where I'm explaining to them this topic of mind chatter, as you describe what it is. And mind chatter always shows up when it feels like there's a lot at stake and there's a whole lot of uncertainty. So the typical pattern is athletes are playing well in practice, they're playing well in the off season, and then it comes to game time, the lights are on, and they panic because their mind starts pumping out all these doubts and second guessing. Where I take them on this journey and I get to explain to them that actually this is how our minds work. Our minds are apt to try to protect us from potential hazards or dangers. Off the field, if you were walking close to a flame, there's a part of your mind that warns you, don't get too close, you could burn yourself. I say to athletes, that's exactly the same thing going on when you're getting onto the lacrosse field or onto the baseball diamond. Your mind is warning you. You're not worried there about getting burned, but you're worried there about maybe getting psychologically burned. You're worried about all the possible ways that you could look bad, disappoint people, not meet expectations, embarrass yourself, and let alone maybe not get further along the path you're on towards your dreams in sport. So what I teach is sort of coming actually to normalize a voice that a lot of young people and not so young people think is abnormal. It's actually quite normal under pressure, under high stakes situations to have a voice that says, what if you're going to blow it? So the approach I use is teaching them to expect it to come, to what I call make room for it, which is a totally counterintuitive approach because a lot of our athletes think there's something wrong with them if they have a thought that says, what if I mess up today? Or What if so-and-so does better than me today? And when I'm telling them, no, actually, that's a thought that we're going to plan on having. In fact, you could tell me, athlete, on a Tuesday what your chatter is going to say to you on a Saturday. It's already scripted. You already know, and they laugh and they go, you're so right. So I get them to expect it. Then I go through a series of steps, which I outline in the book, about how to like make room for it. What does that look like? And that how confidence actually doesn't turn out to be the thing they really need. Maybe we'll talk about this more. It's really more about courage than confidence. And for many of the athletes who come see me, it's a huge relief because they've walked around thinking that there's something wrong with them.
So that's one of our biggest SpeakUp impacts, honestly. 95% of our participants say that as a result of SpeakUp, they realize that they have similar feelings and experiences to other people, and there's so much relief in that. So what we will often say at SpeakUp, it's not the thing that the young person is struggling with that really causes the damage. It's that secondary thought of what's wrong with me, that how come I fill in the blank.
Yes, and I think the powerful thing, I resonate with that completely, is that I give them an explanation. I actually don't just say that you're okay, but I explain why their chatter's showing up, that it makes good sense that it's showing up. And yes, I get to disabuse them of this notion that they're a wimp or a coward, which in the world of sports is a big stigma, because especially if you see yourself as a strong, tough athlete, when you start doubting yourself, you think that, maybe you're not cut out for this. And I get, again, to turn that all on its head and give them possibility where maybe they felt they've lost it.
As a parent, I like to think about what I've learned from you that's counterintuitive and related to the mind chatter. I think myself and a lot of parents think that the answer is to tell your child just to think positively.
Yeah.
Give yourself affirmations, be positive, be confident. So can you talk a little bit about why that's not the most effective strategy?
Yeah, well, if you have a chattery child, telling them to be confident actually backfires, because as soon as they hear that they should be confident, they think, again, their chatter comes in and says, I can't even do that right. And they're already feeling like they can't do it right. And the message in the book and the message I want to give to parents is it's not always about being more confident or about being more positive. Really what I do is I try to teach how to manage the doubts. That's kind of what I do with them. They don't need to be more of anything. It's not that they're not enough. It's not that they're not capable. It's more that no one has taught them that how to manage that voice that tries to sabotage all of their best efforts. So for parents, I often advise them to sort of stay away from talking about you need to be more confident, you should be more confident. I'm a parent too. I understand exactly where parents are coming from. All we want for our kids is to feel like $1 million. But we're better off saying, and this is one of the things I do when I work with parents and their kids together, is try to change the conversation at home. Like, hope your chatter must be going on duty right now, huh? How about that? Or I could tell that this is a tough time for you. There's a part of you that's telling you that maybe you can't do this. That a kid will be more likely to kind of feel like you're connecting with them around than trying to give them some prescription for how to be something that they can't quite access.
And do all kids have chatter to the same degree, or what makes it be more or less in a particular young person?
Absolutely not. I mean, there are people, young and not so young, who hear my conversations about chatter, getting ready for the game, and they go, I'm not really sure. Like, I kind of know what you mean, but I kind of don't know what you mean. Like, I just go out there, they roll the ball out there, and I just go after it. I'm just trying to help my team win. So no, just like there's all different, kinds of people, there's all kinds of different levels of chatter. The people who come knocking on my door are the ones with the highest levels of chatter, where it's really started to interfere with their ability to perform. They do all the training. They do extra training. They're the ones signing up for the optional workouts. They're the ones getting up earlier in the summer and getting up Christmas morning and getting the workout in. But it's the last thing they tend to look at as the reason why they're not performing. And once they see that there's this missing ingredient, they often hopefully find that they can kind of find a path forward. But no, everyone's a bit different. Just like some people are more anxious than others, there is sort of this more like neurotic, we call it, mindset. There's a more neurotic, anxious people. And those are the people who tend to have the most chatter. Many of my athletes, although not all have chatter off the field, not just on the field, chatter in social domains. Although that's not necessarily always the case. I'm always trying to see where else have you experienced chatter in your life? And I know this isn't what you asked, but one of the things that once I teach them about chatter, they do find that there's other areas where they can apply it to. Going up and trying to meet a friend who they've always wanted to say hello to, but didn't have the courage to do it. They didn't have the confidence, but now they know it's really not about that. So that's been pretty exciting, the feedback I've been getting about the book, that it's helped people beyond just in sports.
So we're talking about managing mind chatter, and there's a 4-part plan. And one of the first 2 is, number 1, expect it and recognize that its job is to help protect you. The second one was to make room for it. And then can you talk about the 3rd and 4th parts of the action plan to manage mind chatter?
Well, the 3rd part, when we're talking about athletes, is about where to put your attention. It becomes clear after I've explained mind chatter to them that obviously it's not something you really want to be thinking a lot about if you can help it, but sometimes you can't. But the question that athletes often have trouble answering is, well, where should you be focused in that tennis match, in that baseball game? And they go, I don't know. I just hope I play well. And of course, hoping to play well when you get to a high level in sport is really not the best strategy. Although everybody should hope to play well, of course. So we want to come up with very sort of specific areas where they should focus. A lot of times the mistake athletes unwittingly make is they only are focused on the outcome and the result. I want to score 10 points in the basketball game. I want to get 2 home runs today. I want to win. I want us to make the playoffs. Those are goals that I want them to have. And we go through in the book, those types of, I call them back pocket goals, are really helpful to have. You need somewhere to shoot for, something that you're aiming to achieve. Otherwise, kind of, what are you doing? But focusing on them turns out to be completely unhelpful. It only enhances the chatter. The kinds of front pocket goals that I talk about are specific controllable goals, like where my elbow might be when I'm shooting my jump shot, or what places on the floor are the best places on the basketball floor for me to shoot from. Or a small goal could be around communication with my teammates. When I communicate, I'm a goalie in soccer, and when I communicate with my defense people, like, that's going to be better for our team. So we try to come up with small, focused, sort of winnable goals, or goals that they could shoot for. Those we sort of say, keep in your front pocket, so to speak. Then we sort of shrink the game for them. So the game isn't necessarily about whether you win or not, because you can't control that. If you could control whether you win or not, you'd never lose. So the game then becomes about these small goals and about small measurable goals that they feel like they can work on. And we have found in the work that we do with athletes, I have found this leads to incredible improvement. And the last piece of the book in the 4th step is about courage over confidence, which is when you're doubting yourself, when you're fearful, we want to see this as an opportunity to be courageous, because of course you can't be courageous except in the presence of doubt and fear. Fear always precedes courageous action. So we're trying to turn on its head another thing in a counterintuitive type of way, the nerves that they're having, and saying, ooh, maybe there's an opportunity here, an opportunity where you don't have to worry about how confident you are, but to be courageous. And having conversations with kids about what does courage mean is really interesting. Sometimes it reminds them of their dying dog who fought their last days of life, and they think how brave he or she was, or they think about their uncle, or they think about their aunt, or they think about a time in math class where they had the courage to ask the teacher, they were so nervous finally, for help, and how that helped them. In many cases, we're talking about the courage to stay focused on the goals that they've set for themselves, a commitment to those goals. The relief that the athletes feel is that, wow, I don't have to worry about how confident I am anymore. It's like dumbbells coming off their shoulders. They feel so relieved, and they now have a better game plan entering the match.
That's helpful. You talked about how young people don't want to disappoint their parents. And one of the things that has struck me in SpeakUp is how many young people are trying not to disappoint. So I think there's this myth out there that young people are so self-focused. And in my experience, they are worrying all the time about not wanting to worry or burden or disappoint their parents. I heard it a lot about how they also don't want to disappoint coaches, teammates. So they're managing a lot of either real or perceived expectations. And in addition to that, one of the things that I saw in your book that I also was struck by hearing from young people directly in Speak Up was how much they feel like their parents have invested in them, energy-wise, time-wise, and financially, and how they feel like they need to, quote, deliver a return on that investment. And that's a lot of pressure. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, even parents who are the most well-meaning go out of their way to try not to put pressure on themselves, as I know you know, Martie, from all your years with Speak Up, that they can't inoculate their kids from feeling that way. These are caring kids, most of them, and they, like all of us, we all are afraid of being judged or being looked at as less than. In some dynamics, they have a sibling, the kids I'm working with, and they feel like, they have to live up also to the way their sibling performed or what their sibling accomplished. So it's unavoidable, but it's often unspoken. And part of what makes Speak Up amazing is it makes the unspoken spoken. And I feel like we're aligned in that way. That's what happens in my office when I have a huge whiteboard in my office where we write down all the things that are potentially at stake in this upcoming tournament. And inevitably listed as, disappointing parents or not giving them the return on the investment I hoped. And when kids sort of get it off their chest and we don't necessarily have to fix it. It doesn't necessarily we need to bring the parents in and we have to have this gigantic conversation, but it just has to be, it has to be expressed so it's not some dirty little secret anymore that they're carrying around. And kids often feel like they have all these secret feelings that I'm normalizing and Speak Up is normalizing. And so it also teaches the kids about how complicated it is. When they see this laundry list of worries that they have getting ready for the game, I could say to them, it's no wonder it's hard for you to focus on hitting a softball. Look at all the sort of things that your mind is sort of churning up at from time to time and worried about. And some of those fears, though, are exaggerated fears. Some of them aren't, and they recognize that. They're chattery, exaggerated, worst-case scenario fears. So we can take them one by one and get them to talk about it. And there's often a lot of relief for the kids that I see, just getting it off their chest and feeling like they're not carrying any more secrets.
I loved in the book that you had a lot of written exercises that were just short, you call them whiteboard moments, but that's something that I think is really helpful because when you look at it in black and white as an athlete or as a parent, you do have those aha moments.
Yeah. Well, I love to kind of get kids out of their heads, and that's why I have the whiteboard in my office. I guess it's because I like to do that. I mean, I'm just sort of practicing what I preach as well. And a lot of the athletes are really visual, so seeing it is I'm learning that, they're used to chalk talks, they're used to watching video and coaches dissecting video with them. And I kind of think of myself as a coach of sorts. We're kind of now dissecting kind of mental game, pluses and minuses. And we're doing exercises, either they're doing them with me or they're doing them at home that kind of get them to say, this is how I've, for example, traditionally handled my mind chatter. And now after learning some of this is kind of how I'm going to respond to my chatter the next time. So I'm glad you like that.
Yeah. So we talked about how being an athlete can become part of your identity. And one of the things that we've heard a lot about in Speak Up is when an athlete gets injured. And I often will say that as families we underestimate the impact that can have on a young person's mental health. And so can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing with athletes and injury and effects on mental health and how we can help them navigate that?
Yeah, probably the biggest growing part of my practice, and I've been practicing for close to 20 years, is working with injured athletes. Could be a couple of reasons why, but we're working with so many of them. I think there are a couple things to appreciate. One is it's more than just losing your sport that makes it so hard to be out. There's a social component to being on the field and being on the sideline and being in the locker room. There's a social component when you're not playing and they're talking about the game at around the cafeteria table and you're not feeling like you're part of it. There's a piece of all that sometimes parents don't fully appreciate, that it's not just the fact that they're not playing, it's that they might feel now like they're on the outs. And there's no fun being on the outside of a peer group, right? Your self-esteem is often based on how well you fit within the group. And when you're not in the group or don't feel like you're in the group, it's incredibly hard. Kids are often in PT when they could, instead of being at practice, so they're there with their PT person or they're and they're missing out on it. So we want kids to try to be as involved with the team as they can be because of that social connected piece. Good coaches will help the kids find a role on the sidelines to keep stats, watch video, be a kind of a coach of sorts, coach up the younger players, finding some role because because your identity is so connected to be an athlete, we need to sort of find some other role that you can play where we could take advantage of what the kids know. The other thing parents can do to help their kids is encourage them to advocate for themselves, either with the coach to update the coach on how they're doing, or with their PTs. I mean, we work closely with a lot of PTs or athletic trainers, and kids will go through their PT. Most of the kids we work for are very dutiful, but they don't know why, for example, they're doing this exercise and not that one, why it is their timetable is this, but their friend who also had an ACL injury is that. There's knowledge is power. So encouraging your kids to ask your PT, and any good PT will explain why they're doing an exercise, what it's there to strengthen or stretch, and what their timetable is. It gives kids sort of more of a role and more of a voice in it versus feeling like they're just sort of, having everyone sort of do this to them. The last thing we often want to do, and parents can help with this, and we try to help with this, is having what we call weekly wins. Sometimes when you're rehabbing and you're injured, there's not a lot to kind of bank on that is feeling good but we want kids to try to find the good in the week. It could be as small that they're able to lift 5 more pounds, or it could be that I did go ask the coach how I could help, or it could be that I discovered maybe with this extra time that I'm spending more time doing my schoolwork and I'm actually kind of becoming a better student because of it. Or I asked a friend to hang out because I wasn't going to the game because they're traveling so far, and I decided I was going to ask him or her to hang out because I've always wanted to hang out with them, but I never had the time. That could be a weekly win. So we encourage parents to encourage their kids to find those wins. And those are just some of the ideas that we try to use to help these injured athletes.
That reminds me of a phrase in your book where you talked about how we're thinking about improving and not proving as an athlete.
Yeah, I make a distinction between proving and improving. And when we get on the field or we're injured and we feel like we can't prove anymore, we have to kind of shift to where are we looking to improve? I think that's probably what you're picking up on. Where are the small areas of improvement? And we give that same message to athletes because they're trying so hard to prove that they are the one, that they should be seen, that they should be noticed, that they're the best. And I understand there's part of that ego piece that is helpful, but too much of it winds up working against them. The proving leads to pressure, mistakes become problems, and the fun gets really lost in it. We send athletes on the field looking to improve. Where are the small areas you can get better, those sort of front pocket goals, because mistakes then become opportunities to learn and grow. So we're trying to frame this more growth mindset, improvement mindset. People think the prove mindset is always the way to be, like the harder, more determined you are, the more, and sometimes that can backfire for these very chattery kids.
I remember, talk again, things that surprised me. And I remember having a lot of people in our circle of, influence where they were D1 recruits early. And as parents or other people, you're looking and saying, that must be so great. That must be such a relief. That must be. And then to hear students talk about how much pressure that was, how the fear of thinking that somehow you're going to make a mistake and lose it is even in many times more significant than what if I never get there or reach that goal. And, no one is feeling empathetic. They're all thinking, oh, you've got it made. You know where you're going to college. And that was something that surprised me.
Yeah, so one of the first examples I actually have in the book, which is a true story, I've changed, the sport and sort of so the person couldn't be identified, but was of somebody who had already been recruited. And a lot of people don't appreciate that it's you get chosen or selected to play at a school. For some kids, not for all, now the pressure is really on. They might not come see me before recruitment. They're just so busy just trying to focus on getting it. But I get them after they get recruited for that very reason, Martie, which is now they feel like all eyes are on them. They have to play like a such and such D1 or D3 or whatever player, a college player. And and there's no room for them to fail. So they start to become really perfectionistic. Recently, and even including just yesterday, I was working with somebody from out of state, and that's led to, that could lead to really some serious mental health issues. I mean, some of these things are not just mild worries about what people might think. This one young woman sort of acknowledges she developed an eating disorder after she had locked it in at her Ivy League institution, and where everybody would think she's got nothing to worry about anymore. Her brain immediately went on, I have to show up and be better than good. I have to prove over this next year, she's only a junior, I have to prove that I am more than ready. I don't want the coach changing their mind. And she acknowledges that came after recruitment, not before.
So that was another surprise in the book when you talked about mind chatter that is before the game, during the game, and even after the game or major accomplishment, like in that instance.
Yeah, yes. Yes, the mind will, and what I'm trying to teach in this book and in my practice is to not be caught off guard by it and not to think that that's a sign of that there's something wrong. It could be a clue. Wow, I'm starting to get really anxious or chattery. Kind of what am I making at stake right now? What is it that kind of is getting triggered here? I'm already starting to think about future me, and I'm starting to think about some people call it awfulizing, AWFUL. I'm thinking about the awfulness of the future. Obviously, people call it catastrophic thinking. Usually if you're starting to feel that awful, chattery feeling, it's because you're not focusing on where you are in the moment. You're worried that something is going to happen in the future that you can't control. And I want people to be able to kind of recognize that. It doesn't mean you're not going to be nervous or chattery anymore, but at least you kind of understand what's happening to you. And there are other techniques. I don't go too much in the book. You can breathe, you can call a friend, you can write some of these things down, begin to sort of settle yourself down so it doesn't lead to this perpetual state of panic.
This has been so helpful. And so if you were giving parents advice of, 3 things that they could do to support their athlete, what would that be?
I think it would start with them managing their own mind chatter. We are chattery as parents. I got chattery watching my kids, I have 3 daughters, play sports and compete. I had to work on myself driving to the cross-country meet. I had to talk to myself about what's important versus sort of what's not important and why I'm there. I'm not here to say I'm any better than or any different. I had to work on myself. So parents keeping an eye on their own chatter, because if they don't, it tends to lead to over-controlling their kids and over-investing and over-caring and obsessing. And the kids will pick up on that right away. One of the things that also can lead to, which is sort of a second point, is there's too much conversation oftentimes in some families about sports. You want your kids to just enjoy themselves. Every parent will say that and embrace the challenge. But at the dinner table, if you're talking about the next round of playoffs and who they're going to face and what their record is against that person the last time and what they should expect to do this time, you're not helping. And a lot of what we say to our kids about our sports doesn't really actually lead to much improvement. So less is more. We were talking about this, Martie, and I guess maybe this comes to mind is, the last thing I want to say about that is because we're trying to get kids to not just think of themselves only as athletes. So at the dinner table, if you're talking about their artwork, you're talking about what's going on in the world of politics, what's going on in their social life, what's going on with your other kids who may not be athletes, right? Because they get dragged along to a lot of this stuff. Maybe it's the kids' time who aren't playing in the game to give them a voice. And the last one I was going to say is I sometimes write these sort of fake prescriptions to athletes, to parents of athletes, to not go to the game. Here it is. You're going to go to that Starbucks that's, around the corner. And then there's that nice little nature walk. And then you're going to pick up Jane or Johnny at the end and have them tell you, if they want to tell you, what happened in the game. And because parents can't help themselves when they watch and they see a drop ball in the second quarter to say what happened in the second quarter, losing sight of the fact that they made lots of great plays in the game and losing sight that who really cares whether they dropped it or not. And the kid is well aware that they dropped it, so they don't necessarily need to be reminded of it. And so I say to parents, I said this to several parent workshops I did recently, and I got a giggle out of it, so I'll say it again, which is you don't necessarily need to talk to your kids about the game. Because I had a parent say to me, well, when he comes home, and I come home from work, I want to know, what happened today? And I go, I'm not saying it's bad to ask what happened, but you don't necessarily have to know what happened. Everything will move on if you don't know kind of everything that happened in the game. Why does it really, really matter? And I just wanted parents to sort of think before you ask these, again, generally well-meaning questions, that you might see them as a well-meaning question, but they might interpret it as pressure. They might interpret it as too much. They might already be done with the game and ready to move on to something else in their lives. So you could also ask your kids, how helpful is it when I ask you about the game? How helpful is it when we talk about it in the car ride home? And if you're going to ask those questions, hopefully you'll be able to listen to them and follow their instructions.
One of the phrases we say in Speak Up a lot is that there is the message I think I'm sending is, because often in those situations, the message that parents think they're sending is, I am paying attention to you. Mm-hmm. I am relating to you around your reality. But that is often not the message that the young people are getting. And what that looks like in an academic setting is a parent might say, how was your test? Yes. And they think it's saying, I'm paying attention to the details of your life. Yes. But that's not what the young people are hearing. And you mentioned about not coming to all the games, and we talked earlier about those teens tell us moments. Well, I can distinctly remember a young person saying, sometimes I really like it when my parents don't come to my game, because then I get to give them the highlight reel. And in the highlight reel, I tell them about the 12 points I scored. But they weren't at the game, so they didn't see that I also missed 3 rebounds or, scored an on basket, God forbid. So that was really helpful, because parents are often thinking and feeling bad if they can't make it to all the games. And so that was really freeing for parents when they heard that, hey, sometimes it's good. We just want to give you the highlight reel.
I love it. We speak a common language.
So Mitch, thank you so much for joining us and for the support of young athletes. It's been incredible to have your practice exist in our backyard. I know we've learned a lot from you. You've shared a lot with parents at SpeakUp Coffees, et cetera. So I just want to first say thank you, and thanks for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I want to do some tips and takeaways, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we've got mind chatter, expect it, make room for it, focus on actionable goals, have courage, not worrying so much about confidence. That's more of an outcome. Parents, manage your own anxiety. That calm can be contagious. What am I missing? Any other tips?
Be mindful of how much you're talking just about sports and tournaments and competitions at home. How much it's serving you versus how much it's really serving your kids. Parents, I would encourage you to reach out to other parents. We tend to silo ourselves. Maybe if you're on the sidelines watching your kids play and you're all the way at the other end of the fence and there's parents on the other end of the fence, go say hello. I think there's less of a sense of community than ever. And you'll find you'll have plenty of like-minded parents on the sidelines. So we want our kids to socialize. We want our kids to feel connected. I think parents sometimes need to make sure that they're spending some time trying to connect with other parents. It might help you as a parent feel better. It's not just your kid who's getting way stressed out, or it's not just you who's worried about this. You could get some good therapeutic help just from being in the parent community a little bit more.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. We want to encourage you to get a copy of Mitch's book, Courage Over Confidence, Managing Mind Chatter and Winning the Mental Game, on Amazon.com. You can also visit his website, greenpsych.com, where you can sign up for his newsletters. We are grateful to the Uncommon Individual Foundation for recording and producing this podcast. UIF is a mentoring nonprofit that powers On Track Plus. And of course, we are thankful for you, our listeners. Visit speakup.org to learn more about our programs. If SpeakUp is in your school, we are in 30 middle schools and high schools. We encourage you to experience it. You can also join us for one of our parenting adult coffees that cover the topics that teens want to talk about, that parents can learn about. And also our grandparent coffees, our youth mental health first aid training, and our QPR suicide prevention training. As we end every Speak Up, we want you to know that you don't have to do life perfectly, you don't have to do it alone, and it is not a straight line. We are constantly rerouting as we help our teens navigate the journey to adulthood. Give yourself some grace. You are already moving forward just by listening to this podcast. Remember to subscribe to the Speak Up podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or you can watch us on YouTube, which will be posted on the Speak Up website, speakup.org. Again, thank you, goodbye, and join us for our next episode of the Speak Up podcast.